Ladies and gentlemen, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Thank you so much for being here. As you walk in, you'll see that there are QR codes on the wall. Please take a picture of that QR code and go to that website. That website is where you can sign in. It is our guest book. Please put some memories of George on there and any pictures. And it's, again, a guest book for us for this event. Thank you very much. Go to the QR codes, and we'll talk to you soon.
I'll just stay in focus, right?
Aaron, what should I call you?
Aaron?
Just give me a signal.
Am I going to be the first person going online? Oh boy, how do I look? Is my tie straight?
Your tie is very straight. You are very straight.
Your glasses are already good. Is that the way you want it? Oh! So, you'll see it. Okay, you're live.
Hello everyone, I have here with me Aaron Kahn, who has known George for many years. Anything you want to share about your time with George?
35 years. It's hard to say goodbye. I'm glad to be here, and it's gratifying to see so many people feel the way where at least they made the effort to be here, and this is probably the biggest CME that I've ever been to. So it's a good thing to be able to bring these people together. And we got lucky because it might not even happen, because we might not have even been allowed to assemble inside. But we got the permission, and it's happening. It's bittersweet to see friends, but under the circumstances.
Do you have any memories of your time here?
Yes, I have. I mean, I spent 8 years here as a cadet, lots of years here as a senior. George was missing a lot because of his military career, but when I first joined, you were there, and our cameraman was there, and I just remember being in awe of George. And growing up, I thought he was a model for me in so many ways. So it's super lucky to have him here at the squadron, and to, as I got older, to be able to call him a friend, because obviously when I was 12 years old, we're probably not going to be pals with somebody that's 25, but I'm really lucky to have had all the time that I did.
Thank you very much. Hi, we have another Squadron 86 senior member, Mr. James Hermosa.
How's everybody today? Great to see everybody. Head off Georgia right away. Still a little lost for words. It's a great influence to everybody. That's for sure.
You spent a lot of time with George here in the Armory. Do you have any memories, specific memories of George in this place?
Well, there's a lot of stuff. I mean, when he used to play basketball here and try to beat us all up as dancing cadres. But I remember one specific event. We were on FTX down at the Presidio, and one of the cadets twisted her ankle. And like a senior member that it was, I was like, oh, let's go, let's get out of there, let's go to her and help her out. And bring her aid. Not George. Calm before the storm, and during the storm, he gets up, finishes up his hot dog, walks over, says, put her down. Felt her ankle. Is that hurt? Move it. You're fine. Typical George. He's so calm while everybody's running around with their head chopped off. Always focused. That's what I always remember.
I agree with you 100%. Completely. Calm, cool, collected George. Anything else you want to say to our friends before you sign off?
I'm sure everybody remembers George. I admired him. He had to be admired. I'm proud to know him as one of my friends.
All right. Thank you very much, Jules. Thank you to all of you.
And ladies and gentlemen, as you are coming in this afternoon, we again ask that you scan that QR code. There's a QR code for you to scan, and you can share all of your memories on there. That is our guest book for today. Again, as you're coming in, please scan the QR code. The QR code is our guest book. That's where you can share memories and add photos. So please do so.
George COBC tried very hard to get me to go. So we have some cadets here for us. Some words are recorded for us. Some words that remind us.
I'm going to say very direct, but direct with love. Sometimes, I mean, even though he was a colonel,
Kind and direct and love. Raise a hand who has a point first.
sorry, I guess I will. He was, I mean, in that being direct and loving, I think he really helped shape some of the things I was struggling as a kid. And he really helped giving her. And I think with the directness, these are things that you need to do differently in your life. That really helped shape the way it's been a while since I've seen George. It's only been a year since I spoke to him. And this has been years. I'm a grown adult. I'm now, and I had it's not an incident, but a problem that I needed to solve that involves military. I don't know. Girls, I knew that at least. Direct will have a solution. And he answered. Always answered. I was able to solve that problem in my own professional life. What are these like sides? Also, I mean, that's kind of I agree with all the things I had learned. 18 years old, still trying to figure out the world. So, I think nobody's around my head. Right. Been with other friends that have children. And I never know who I
I have found three amigos. George Ishikata, Gavin Light, here in
I met George when I was around 15 years old. I was a kid at the time. Living in Southern California, but I think I probably met him the first time somewhere around some random camping or something, but primarily through CNBC, that opportunity. And probably my most prominent memory of George is when he would always leave places for at COBC, and it was literally the fire outside, chat, everybody was comfy in their sweatshirts, pajamas, and we would all gather around and he would read. And not only do I very clearly, viscerally remember that feeling of being him, right? It was like I wasn't gonna, no one was gonna be with me. And George Ishikata was telling me that I could go do whatever I wanted to do. And it was sincere and genuine. It was amazing. And then we got mine. And in the middle of that, George is amazing. That's it. I'm just gonna cut right there before I get emotional.
It's all right to get emotional. You would be the first person.
It's okay.
Thank you for doing this on the first time. Richard,
Thank you very much.
But thank you so much for having me. Yeah, George is really cool in my life.
Well, I met George through one of my closest friends here, Michael. We were in a Civil Air Patrol squadron down in Palo Alto, and Mike went to CATC and came home with all these crazy ideas about how things should be done, and he wouldn't stop talking about all the things he had learned. And of course, George is the one who run that program. It wasn't too long after that that Michael wanted to go join Squadron 86 here in San Francisco. So George was excellent selection. He was the guy that everyone looked up to, especially people that I looked up to. So it was two levels of separation. I just really wanted to be a part of that. Every memory I have of George is the smile. I involved that smile. No matter what was happening, no matter when I was CTG commander and everything felt like it was going wrong and I thought the world was coming to an end, George was the guy who came in with a smile and made you realize that you could handle anything. You really could, with a positive attitude. And even when you screwed up, the smile was still there in a way that made you want to be a better person and do a better job. That's how I
Mike.
Yes. I've known George since I was 12, since I joined the program. When I joined, there was a lot of people in the program that I looked up to. There was a cadet. I want to be just like that cadet when I grow up. When I turned senior, George was who I wanted to be. And like's been mentioned a couple times, the smile that he always showed, he'd always laugh. The scary thing is I used to make fun of him for being old, right? And now I've realized that I'm older now than he was when I was laughing at him. So it just kind of shows that now it is my chance to be that team member that he was for me and to help the next people that come along. So take it from here.
Thank you for everything, and you'll all love George. Back to you.
Stand by one.
I just got to introduce you. This is Marty and Will. And Marty's going to tell me how he knows George.
I was a senior member in the 70s. And met George and he was applying for a staff position in Canada. Selection. No, I was a cadet before I met George. And then I was a senior member. When I met George.
You had a hand in one game.
I had a small part. I had a small part. I was one of many of the team people involved. Crossed paths with him over the years. Very proud of the person he became. Very proud of the servant leader that he was.
I agree on the servant leader. I've been
Yeah, overall a good one.
How do you know George?
I met George in the Civil Air Patrol at encampment in 1980. George is one of the people that played a small part in probably my success and who I am today. After that encampment, we became good friends, and I also ended up in the Army, and we had the opportunity to spend some time serving together on active duty.
The two friends of George that have known him from childhood.
Since his childhood.
His childhood. So I think you're having some camera looking at both of our friends here. It's good to know that George has been around in Civil Patrol for like what?
At least.
At least 40 years. All right, thank you, Marty and Will.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, the ceremony will begin in 5 minutes. For those of you who've just joined us, there we go. Ladies and gentlemen, the ceremony will begin in 5 minutes. Now is a good time to turn off all of your electronics and find a seat. Please remember to keep your mask on and observe social distancing. The seats have been separated to observe this protocol. 5 minutes.
Future's golden. Don't let go, don't give it up. Just keep holding. Even when you've had enough, I will be alive. When you're low, I'll lead you home, chariot. Take you back to where you're from, chariot. One step forward on the road ahead of us. Don't look back, no. You just need a bit of luck. Oh, oh, tonight. When you're low, I'll lead you home, chariot. Take you back to where you're from, chariot. When you're low, I'll lead you home, chariot. Take you back to where you're from, chariot. Yeah, 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 When you're low, I'll lead you home, chariot. Take you back to where you're from, chariot. When you're low, I'll lead you home, chariot. Take you back to where you're from, chariot.
If we could take our seats. My name is Ned Lee. It's going to be a long afternoon. Let me start by welcoming our general officers, soldiers, airmen, cadets, family, and friends. It is, in fact, fitting that we are met in the National Guard Armory for the celebration of George's life. George loved the Army, and he loved armories, and especially this one. As many of you know, this armory is home to San Francisco Cadet Squadron 86, where George was a member since he joined CAP in the late 70s. This is also the armory where George commanded the military intelligence battalion that occupied so much of his life and his service. There could be no more appropriate location to celebrate George's life than in this building that we're in today. I suspect for many of us today will be a little tough at times. But this is meant to be, and I hope it is truly, a celebration of his remarkable life. And we're going to hear from his colleagues, family, and friends. George was taken from us too soon, far too soon. And as someone who's been to far too many memorials in the past year, I understand the natural reaction to say something like, but he was just on the verge of great things. And that's absolutely true. But as you all know, George has already done great things, countless great things. And he has touched each of us here today. And because of that, great things will happen in the future. And today we gather to learn some new aspects of this incredible man. So I've been asked to point out our wonderful program.
Turn the mic in so they can hear a little bit better.
We have the program for you, and in there it is the sequence of events. In just a moment, we're going to have the posting of the colors, the Pledge of Allegiance, a lot of welcoming remarks, an invocation, speakers, slideshow, some funeral honors, some closing remarks, and then our final song. And there is a place in here where there is a URL for a donation, if that's what you would like to do. They're on the back. There will be a reception right here after the ceremony today, and you are welcome to stay, share fellowship, stories about George, and some excellent eats. This event is being live streamed to George's friends and family all over the world, the members of the Civil Air Patrol's Pacific region, where George was their commander, and they are now connected with us by way of this broadcast. As George participated in many Buddhist cultural practices throughout his life, we will now have Ken Paris, the former California Wing Commander and an active CAP chaplain, lead us in a traditional Buddhist prayer.
Thank you, Ned. I invite all of those able to stand with me. Regardless of your faith, I hope you can connect to the virtues expressed in this prayer and how George lived it out in everything that he did. May all beings everywhere, plagued by sufferings of body and mind, obtain an ocean of happiness and joy by virtue of my merits. May no living creature suffer, commit evil, or ever fall ill. May no one be afraid or belittled, with a mind weighed down by depression. May the blind see forms and the deaf hear sounds. May those whose bodies are worn with toil be restored on finding repose. May the naked find clothing, the hungry find food. May the thirsty find water and delicious drinks. May the poor find wealth, those weak with sorrow find joy. May the forlorn find hope, constant happiness, and prosperity. May there be timely rains and bountiful harvests. May all medicines be effective and wholesome prayers bear fruit. May all who are sick and ill quickly be freed from their ailments. Whatever diseases there are in the world, may they never occur again. May the frightened cease to be afraid, and those bound be freed. May the powerless find power, and may people think of benefiting each other.
Thank you, Ken. You can all have a seat. By the way, there's more standing and sitting in your future, but you're all very good at it. I have faith in you. I'm going to exercise my prerogative as the MC and share a short George story. George and I, of course, served in the military together in addition to CAP, and way back in the 20th century, he and I deployed to northern Japan together for one of the Yamasakura exercises. And as we were wont to do, we spent our time off from duty wandering around the town. If you know George, you know that he certainly learned Japanese from his parents, but I don't think he would consider himself fluent. I had taken some immersive Japanese courses while I was an undergraduate, and together we knew just enough to get us into trouble. So we found one of those typical little tiny 4-seat sushi restaurants, family-owned little sushi places that are very frequent in Japan. And over the course of several meals, engaged with the proprietor, who's the only person who works there, to the best of our meager abilities. And then I saw the certificate on the wall, and we learned that the proprietor was a fugu master. And he had gone through the 2-year apprenticeship to learn how to prepare fugu, which is that highly poisonous Japanese puffer fish that is a hallmark of Japanese cuisine. Several people die every year from unprepared fugu. And it's just a joy. So the spirit of adventure required us to give it a shot. And after some half Japanese, half English negotiations, the owner agreed to reserve the entire restaurant for us, which, since it's only 4 seats, it actually sounds fancier than it was. And we had a fugu fest, just George and I, and it was glorious. The chef prepared a fugu sashimi, a kind of stew or soup, fugu chiri, and even deep fried as fugu karaage. And it accompanied by those uniquely humongous Japanese beer bottles, Sapporo, if I remember, and I really don't. And it's not really part of the story, but if you know George, he was not an accomplished drinker. I had crossed out the word lightweight, and I went with not an accomplished drinker. It was at the end of the evening that it was immediately apparent to us that whatever modest skills George and I had in Japanese language, it did not extend to numbers and pricings. And we learned the meal was many thousands of yen more than we thought it was going to be. We had to dip into our emergency cash reserves, and Chris did not get the pearls that I typically brought back from my Japanese deployment that year. But it was worth every single yen to spend a glorious, raucous evening with a lifelong friend and a fellow officer in a miniature restaurant 5,000 miles from home, enjoying the best meal I'd ever have. I'd do it again in a heartbeat. I just wish we could. For those who are able, I invite you to stand now for the posting of the colors and the Pledge of Allegiance. The colors will be posted by San Francisco Cadet Squadron 86. And the Pledge of Allegiance will be led by the JROTC Brigade from Lincoln High School.
Left, face, present, arms. The Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Order, arm, right, face, forward, march.
You may be seated. Those outstanding young people are typical of the young people that George has mentored and taught, both in the outstanding JROTC program as well as the Civil Air Patrol Cadet program, and I'm proud we had them here today. We'll now hear from a few people who knew George from the many, many aspects of his life. To speak on behalf of Major General Baldwin, the Adjutant General of the California Military Department, I invite up Brigadier General Cross, who has served as the brigade commander for the 49th MP Brigade from 2014 to 2017, and as the commandant of the Oakland Military Institute from 2018 to 2019. General Cross is currently the Youth and Community Programs Commander for California. General Cross has known George, as many of us have, for decades, and we're honored to have General Cross with us today, sir.
Thank you, Ned. Before I make my remarks, I'd like to make a special note on the work that Wayne Brown, where's Wayne? Wayne, you're a good friend. Wayne's organized all this. He's had a team, and he will defer to his team, but Wayne Brown's a leader, and I'd like to give him a courtesy round of applause for bringing us all together today. I'm here on behalf of General Baldwin for the California National Guard. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, Lena, this is not what I planned on doing today. But as is often the case with these tragedies, it makes us realize how little we control in our lives. And what we are left with, all of us, is how did we impact the people that were in our lives? And did we make this world a better place? Did we treat people well? Did we take care of them? Were we kind? And as we gather here today and take stock, it is clear that Colonel Ishikata built a life of kindness, empathy, and service. And I'm here to talk about the military service of Colonel George Koji Ishikata. He served from 1985 to 2015, exactly 30 years. As is the case with many officers in Colonel Ishikata's year group, his service was performed in peace and in war. After graduating and receiving his commission as a second lieutenant from San Francisco State, Colonel Ishikata was assigned as a platoon leader in the 670th Military Police Company. He was quickly recognized as an outstanding young officer and rewarded, and I have that word in quotes, with selection as aide-de-camp to the 49th Military Police Brigade Commander, Brigadier General Paul Husby. I assure you, there could not be two different people than George Ishikata and Paul Husby. But he prevailed, as George always did, and he was assigned to his first command as headquarters detachment commander of the 49th MP Battalion in my hometown, Walnut Creek, California. In 1989, an opportunity to be promoted to captain presented itself, and Colonel Ishikata took an assignment in this very armory as the 223rd MI Battalion S1 and S4. This was followed by command of the 223rd MI Battalion Headquarters Company, followed by transfer to the operations officer job of the 223rd MI Battalion, where he was promoted to major in 1985, field grade officer. He's fast tracking at this point. Colonel Ishikata was selected and attended the Command and General Staff College in 1997, returned to California and served in the 40th Infantry Division from 1998 to 2001 as the Secretary of the General Staff and the Deputy Operations Officer. In 2001, his ship came in. Colonel Ishikata was hand-selected by Brigadier General Jim Combs to serve as the G2, G3 of the newly established 49th Combat Support Command in Fairfield, California. Colonel Ishikata served in this capacity for 2.5 years and was promoted to Lieutenant Colonel in 2001. In 2004, Colonel Ishikata was selected to command this very battalion, the 223rd MI Battalion, the unit he had given so much service to. And as many of you know in this room, you do not succeed in command, you survive command. And George did that with abundance. For 32 months, he was the commander of this battalion. At the conclusion of his command, Colonel Ishikata deployed to Iraq, serving as the Chief Exploitation Officer for the Multinational Corps Iraq in Baghdad from 2007 to 2008. His work was recognized as cutting edge, and the Army detailed Colonel Ishikata to Afghanistan to establish the same program that was successfully identifying insurgents in Iraq. Unbelievably, his tour in Afghanistan concluded when he was transferred to Kosovo to serve as the Combined Joint Intelligence Officer for NATO Command Headquarters. Colonel Ishikata served in this capacity for almost 2 years. So let me be clear. From 2007 to 2010, 3 years, Colonel Ishikata served in Iraq, Afghanistan, and Kosovo in direct succession, returning to the United States on only 2 occasions. This was his best imitation of General Doug MacArthur. His work was distinguished enough to be assigned to Washington, D.C. as the Chief of Intelligence, Surveillance, and Reconnaissance within the Office of the Secretary of Defense. He served in this capacity until his retirement from federal service in 2015. Colonel Ishikata is the recipient of numerous state and federal awards, with this highest award being the Defense Superior Service Medal, normally awarded to officers serving at the general officer level. I want to say something to everyone in attendance today, especially the young men and women here. Colonel George Ishikata is that rare leader who did his job and took care of the people around him while he did it. The United States Army and the California National Guard We're lucky to have Colonel Ishikata in our ranks, and will be forever in debt for the sacrifices, time, and energy he gave to make this a better state and a better nation. You will be missed, George, but your service will never be forgotten. Thank you.
Thank you, General Cross. Next, I'm honored to welcome Brigadier General Jim Combs to speak to George's military career. It's accurate to point out that General Combs knew George incredibly well and helped mentor George throughout his career. We're honored to welcome you, sir.
Okay, everybody, take a deep breath. It's okay. This has been a hard time getting this information on George. He was a deep personal friend that spanned over 30 years of association with George and all of his friends. And I, frankly, was taken back dramatically when I heard about the news because, in my view, his story had only just begun. But his celebration of life has got to include something that's really important to every person sitting in this room. When you assess yourself personally and think about what you value most in life, what's dearest to your heart, you usually go to a few fundamental concerns and issues, and they always have to do with your values. And I'm going to talk more to George's values than what he accomplished. I think General Cross, you did a marvelous job outlining an extraordinary career of an individual that rose through the ranks, that impacted so many lives and saved lives. And we'll talk about that briefly. George's leadership and success was all about his personal values. They truly were. Whether he was a member of the military corps or the military intelligence corps, he gathered around him people he lifted up, that admired him, that won their personal friendships. And friendships are not easily won. Takes a special person to connect on that level. So obviously, any celebration of George is going to involve a celebration of his personal values and how they, I will tell you, impacted me, impacted the military intelligence corps specifically, and I'm delighted and proud to share them with you here today. You know, this whole thing of service, you know, in the military here in the United States, we call all branches the service. That's term's been around for decades. And service really means that. It means you are prepared to lay your life down, if necessary, to support the Constitution of the United States and indeed respond and support the governor of California in times of great crisis. I got a chance to watch George in all those environments, a very unique perspective to have. But I will tell you, his legacy of all the values that I think of those that have connected with me is the value of selflessness. I'm going to spend a little time on that, so bear with me, because George, you deserve it. I've never seen it manifested to such a degree as George did in his daily life. And I think we'll all enjoy that brief journey together. But as you know, I watched George a lot. In fact, my office was right up there, and George would have the Civil Air Patrol on the drill floor, and I'd listen in on his leadership classes. I love that about George. And he had a great hold on youth. And I think they understood how much he cared for them. I really do. But when he talked leadership, he always fell back against our Army values. For those of you that have not been in the Army, we learn them, we memorize them, we commit ourselves to them, and hopefully, in a rare case, we manifest those values in every aspect of our lives. I can't say for every day and every aspect of my life that those values were always on display. I lost my temper a few times, and please don't talk to my wife because she'll tell you where I failed every moment. But here's the deal. I never once saw George retreat from any of those values. Think about it for a moment, and if you know George, I'm going to announce those values right now, and I want you to go through a little exercise. Don't fall asleep on me now, but I want you to think about that value as it relates to celebrating George's life and his meaning to you. And the first one I would bring up is loyalty. He had such a commitment and loyal attention to those that he knew, to the organizations that he served. And he never abandoned that. The other was this thing called duty, an extraordinary obligation. I found him sleeping in that room right over there, sometimes with Nancy Banham. Oh, excuse me. He wasn't sleeping with her. He was working with her over in that room. But I'd come in at 4 o'clock and they'd be hard at work on some recruiting task or one thing or another. And they had slept part of the night because they wanted to meet a deadline or an obligation and refused to let that requirement or obligation pass. Tell me that's not the very strong sense of duty. Respect. The one thing you walked away from any conversation with George was that he respected you. He would never criticize you in front of anybody else. He did have the ability, and this was where we get to personal courage, to come up to a general officer and tell you when you're screwed up. And he did that for me and to my benefit on more than one occasion. And I will tell you, it is not easy for a subordinate to look you in the eye and say, boss, this isn't going to work. George was one that could step up to that. Personal integrity. I wish I could have find and relate a story at any time in his life where he lied to me. I never saw that ever occur. How many people can say that? We have a tendency to lie just to make other people feel good. And maybe George did that, but I never saw it, right? I never actually experienced that with George. But I'm going to focus on the last one that I want to share with you beyond personal courage, and that is selflessness. Because I think the celebration of that particular value in George says everything about George, his commitment to family, his commitment to team, his commitment to you and I, as he tried to lift us up, make us all more successful, because he had that rare gift. If I give you something, I'm going to get a lot more in return. Personal, not monetary, not career climbing, none of that. It was just that he felt good when he could give you help. That's a rare, rare quality when that gift exists. The other thing that I liked about George, and happened more recently, some of you are aware that this morning they conducted a special tribute to George, and that was his role as a Veterans Commissioner for the city and county of San Francisco. Well, for those of you who don't know me, I spent most of my post-retirement period working with veterans, either in jails, in hospitals, in one form or another. But there was always more to do than you could get done. So George and I would always compare notes. Consider the problems and issues affecting the well-being of veterans, those that had been on the battlefield, suffered as a consequence, and needed our help. Well, I will tell you, it's a hard job to take on. George took it on for the mayor. And in his role as a commissioner for the veterans here, he solved and helped problems. And I can tell you there are people today alive as a direct result of his investment in veterans. And I just admire him greatly and learn from him. You know, it's interesting, General Cross, you brought up a fascinating little thing. I got to hire George for his first real job. All right. And as I would often do, and some of you will recall that because there are more than one I hired here today. When I do an interview, I usually ask a question because it tells me a lot about the person. Who do you most admire and why? And I would get, they'd think about it and come back and usually stumble around trying to think, well, what an odd question. What's this got to do with the job? I get that kind of a look. Not with George. George was quick to respond in his first interview, and he said, well, sir, Martin Luther King Jr. But what astounded me about George is he then started to quote Martin Luther King Jr., and I never had that happen before or since. And what he said was life's most persistent, I'm going to get this wrong probably, an enduring question we must ask ourselves, and the most serious issue affecting our society is, what are you doing for others? What are you doing for others? And that became the George mantra. And if you become more aware of all the organizations he was a part of, and there were many, there were 9 organizations I'm aware of that he touched in one form or another. How many of us invest in that number of organizations to find a way that we can help somebody else out? I challenge you to think of either yourself or somebody else that ever fell into that category. That's how special. That's why we have to celebrate that capability. And hopefully it becomes contagious, because it certainly did for me personally. It turned my life in many ways around, because when I went beyond it, at the end of the day, I said, George, why did you take this job on? You know that this is going to add additional time, which you don't have, and you have demonstrated that you have a lot to do. And he said, because I can, they need my help, and I think I can make a difference. That was his statement, and I believe that was always his criteria when he engaged a person or an organization. Remarkable, really, at least from my perspective, and I've been around way too long. Well, don't take that too seriously. I like it to get a little longer, but the reality is I was so taken with George when he said that. Why then, and you must understand now why he engendered so much affection, so much respect, and why we are here so grateful for the person that he was. Another thing I will tell you, and this is a little more lighthearted, George had some issues, okay? He had some issues. The first issue, he has an incessant laugh. And sometimes it wasn't appreciated, because it was directed at me or something I'd done, right? So I could deal with that. The other thing was he was a horrible basketball player, and I lost every time he played with me, and we played right here on this court. They used to have a basketball on both ends, right? And we'd run back and forth. And I'd say, jump it. And he'd look at me like, jump? You want me to jump? Another thing George did is we developed plans and programs. You all have done that. You've all been leaders. You've had to write these things up. Well, George could write an entire op order on a little, what do they call those things? Little tab, little sticky tab. He came in and he wrote the smallest you've ever seen in your life. I'm serious. I looked at it and it was all blue and I couldn't read a thing. And I said, George, you're not really expecting me to do this, are you? And then he would pick up the tab and he would lay down one of the most effective and comprehensive plans, and I would just be standing there astounded. He could read it, but that gives you a glimpse as to why he became an intel officer. No one else was going to read or interpret that information. Nobody. I was trying to think of Post-it. You should have helped me out, General Cross. I mean, I was up here stumbling around. Well, anyway. So one of the last things I want to talk about a little bit. If there's people that you don't know too well here, you should get to know them, honestly, maybe during this session when we're done. But George was an integral part of a team of individuals that fielded one of the most difficult force structures in the state of California. And I have seen it from the perspective of a commanding general of the Army National Guard and the division commander. And I can tell you unequivocally that there was a hotbed of intelligence dialogue of a group of individuals that come along once in a lifetime that share information, solve problems, and create a new and profound capability for our Army. That happened in this armory. And George was right at the center of that cohesive group. They produced individuals that supplied intel individuals to combat theaters and all the ones that General Cross spoke to, and many others, because of their unique capability. They wore the brass of MI and they saved lives because of their intelligence competency, and we can give George and celebrate his contribution to that team forever. And I certainly will. He found a way to find people with 2 languages, meet all the Army requirements, sustain them, learn the science and art of intelligence and communications, and then went out and found the people, trained them, delivered them to our force structure. And when we went for civil disorder, if we went to a fire, if we went to an earthquake in Los Angeles, we had interpreters on the ground saving lives because they could talk the language of the people that were impacted. And when they're in the battlefield or down in Guantanamo Bay, when we were trying to get the right kind of intelligence, it was the 223rd soldiers that stood up and delivered when they were called upon. That would not be here today. But that team that's seated here with us today were actually working with each other, solving problems, and climbing that very, very steep hill to create this capability. Well, okay, I'm going to shut up. Okay, I am, I promise. But before I do, I'll say one last thing. In no small measure, George lifted our lives up individually. He added directly to our personal success. I dare say I would have never achieved and been afforded the opportunities I had without that special group of people, without George being an integral part, lifting everyone in that team. And yes, we went to every restaurant in San Francisco and ate until our heart's content until he was sick. And yes, I had 30 booths out here of different cultural foods when we were doing Culture Day here in the 223rd, and he'd get sick every time. Not because he was full, but because he didn't want to offend any person that made anything that was in front of it. That small story tells the big story. He just would go to the point of self-sacrifice in a significant way to connect with us personally. George, you're a dear friend. You're loved by many. We celebrate you today, and we celebrate everybody that's in this audience that benefited from George's experience. Thank you.
Thank you, General Combs. Next, to share with us George's impact within the JROTC and school community, I'm going to invite up a team led by Lieutenant Colonel Bullard. Colonel Bullard has worked with George. It's okay, you can walk this way, just walk this way. For the last 6 years in the JROTC program in the San Francisco School District. Lieutenant Colonel Bullard is the senior Army instructor at Lowell High School, where it just happens George attended high school when he was of the appropriate age. And Grace too, of course. All right. Colonel?
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for inviting me up to say a few words. One thing I want to mention is how impressed I have been over the last few years with the Civil Air Patrol community. Without a doubt, probably the leading youth development program in the country. I don't think the Army ROTC people would like me to say that, but you guys are amazing. And just the number of people sitting here today speaks to George's impact on that organization. I really struggled with what I might say today, and there aren't any words that really can address the depth of my personal grief. I've known George for 30 years. I was a professor of military science at USF in 1992 to 96, and he came over and introduced himself, and I kind of tracked him for a while after that, and I knew that I wanted to bring him into this program, the JROTC program. And I tried when he had 20 years, and he said, I got another assignment. And I tried again, 25, I got one more assignment. Finally, I got him out here, and he was the brains behind keeping JROTC in San Francisco. I thought about what would George say if he was here, and you know, going to the selfless service point, he wouldn't want us to weep, he wouldn't want us to be sad, but knowing that we are, he would be the first to comfort us. And I know that he's up there trying to do that for all of us. I'm going to invite Leo Nascimento up to the podium. Leo is the senior Army instructor at Washington High School. And Leo's known George for a very, very long time, and I'll let him tell you a little bit about that. Thank you very much.
Okay, so I kind of feel like I'm an elementary school student coming up after all of these PhD speakers, and I feel a bit intimidated, general officers. If you feel like I'm not being quite up to your level, I hope you'll forgive me. Good luck. Thank you, sir. Thank goodness. So I wanted to let you know that this morning we had a separate occasion. for JROTC family, students, faculty, and supporters. So we had an earlier session today, and we did many of the similar activities to pay tribute to this wonderful man. And something that we did this morning was to offer something pulled out of our education techniques, which is think, pair, share. So what I would like for you to do right now is to turn to somebody next to you, and for maybe a couple of minutes, share one thing that you would like to express about Colonel Ishikata. Take a minute, take two, share with somebody next to you. So go ahead, 1 or 2 minutes. So, no problems.
Nobody died. It was just one of the great meals we had. He wasn't quite the gourmet. Appreciated food, especially in his culture.
It's funny, I was in Korea. I went out with a coworker, and we were in a part of town where there was but I saw Billboard and I said, wow, have you ever tried that? And he said, no, my mom died. I was like, oh.
His mom was a great cook.
Okay, well, in the interest of time, I'll give you another 5 seconds. 4, 3, 2, 1. All right, let's bring it back, please. Except, of course, the general officers can keep talking. That's okay. So as I said, I am an ROTC instructor at Washington High School. And for those of you who don't know, ROTC in high school is not a military branch. We are loosely affiliated with the military in the sense that our students have no obligation whatsoever to go into the military. It is an elective class, one which promotes citizenship, and that is really our main goal, is to motivate our young people to become better citizens. Also, I should let you know that I am a proud parent of a couple of Civil Air Patrol cadets right here in the squadron. It's in being in this environment that I really learned about the Civil Air Patrol. I will also point out that one of my high school classmates, Philip Kwong, sitting over there, I once asked him, what was the best leadership development school that you went to? So I was thinking he was going to tell me about, officer basic course or captain's career course or Command and General Staff College. No, he said the best leadership program he ever attended had to do with the Civil Air Patrol. So that kind of blew my mind away. And when my boys became interested, great, go for it. I first met George when I was a junior ROTC student at Lowell High School. No, he was not a student with me. I'm not quite as old. At the time, he was serving as an assistant instructor. So mind you, this means that he was serving as an assistant under our teacher, Sergeant Major Mac Yoshida, which, many of us have very fond memories of. But that wonderful man was also a beacon for George. George came back to school as an assistant instructor that was not getting paid. He had just graduated from high school maybe a couple of years before and was really kind of trying to find his way. So for us students, he was a bit of a curiosity. Who is this guy? I mean, like, aren't you supposed to be in college or something, like, or getting a job somewhere? But no, he would spend 8 to 10 hours at our school teaching us things and helping Sergeant Major Yoshida. On the other hand, we thought, wow, what a cool gig. I mean, you get to come to ROTC and just hang out for 8, 10 hours, and you don't have to go to math class or science class or English. How cool. Anyhow, we soon found out what a great guy he was. He always had a smile that could lift you. Even when you got that F in English or math class, which sometimes happens. I never saw him once get mad or angry. Okay, well, not in high school anyway. More about that later. The kind and affable person we all remember him to be is really the same person that he was then. Eventually, George got his act together and graduated from college, so I understand, and received his Army officer commission, as did I. During our Army careers, we crossed paths a few times. Once, while we were both at Fort Leavenworth, Kansas, he introduced me to his parents, who at the time were living with him in Kansas. It was evident from their kind and gentle ways where George got his warm heart and warm spirit. A favorite memory of mine was from our time in Kansas, when he introduced my wife and me to his favorite Japanese restaurant. It had this menu item called the sushi boat. It was actually a miniature wooden boat that they serve sushi on. That was really cool, but what I found even more cool was the fact that you could find fresh sushi in Kansas. As I retired from the Army and settled into my current job as an ROTC teacher, my thoughts often turned to George, whom I had lost touch with. But I thought, you know, here's a guy that would make an outstanding ROTC instructor. I mean, gosh, he was a cadet and was an assistant instructor. Of course, little did I know that Doug was already courting him. So finally, when George decided that he was going to retire from the Army, actually not decided, but he was getting kicked out, really, because you can't go past 30. It just felt like we had won the lottery, like we're going to get this wonderful officer with so much talent to come and be one of us. His personality was ideal for the job because he just loved and cared for people. And I mean, just from the outpouring, you all probably can attest to that. But not just people everywhere, but specifically his students. He would do just about anything for his students. Earlier, one of his work partner, Master Sergeant Legat, relayed a story that I'd like to share with you, which is he would show up to work and work a full day, 6 in the morning till 8 o'clock at night. Then he'd come over here for the Civil Air Patrol meeting that lasted from 7 to 9 o'clock. Then he would jump on a plane and fly out to Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri, so that he could attend one of his alumni's graduation from basic training. Have lunch with him, and then drive 4 hours back with a thunderstorm warning in place so that he could fly back and be back in time for work the next day. That is the kind of person that he was. Of course, His experience in the Army taught him to be calm under pressure and maintain a strategic view, which important skills when you're trying to promote an ROTC program in San Francisco. So what a godsend when he came. Well, what impact he's had in ROTC in the 6 years that he's been here. The program at his school, Lincoln High School, is thriving, much to the consternation of his rivals at Lowell and Washington. And more importantly, the students there are developing into the leaders of tomorrow. Since he became the director of Army instruction, he's been able to advance the cause of junior ROTC in the city while supporting all 7 of our programs to help us deliver quality instruction to our schools. With George's passing, we've lost a true champion to our cause and a great friend to past, current, and future JROTC students. With looming budget cuts, we miss his leadership more than ever. Although we're going to miss him very much, we are blessed to have traveled the ROTC journey together with him the past 6 years. Oh, earlier I told you that I never saw him get mad or angry. Okay, so that was a little lie because I did see him get really mad. Okay, maybe just once. During one of our monthly instructor meetings, one of our instructors said some things that George took offense to. I could see George squirming in his seat and really growing more uncomfortable. And you can just feel the steam rising from under his collar. The tension was so thick, you could cut it with a knife. However, despite his obvious anger, George continued to speak with his trademark smile on his face. Everyone knew how he was seething inside, but yet by the end of the meeting, it was as though nothing happened. He was calm, smiling, and just talking very well. Finally, I hope you'll bear with me as I read the short poem that sums up how George lived his life from my view. This poem's called Strong in the Rain by Kenji Miyazawa. He never loses his temper, nor the quiet smile on his lips. He does not consider himself in whatever occurs. His understanding comes from observation and experience. And he never loses sight of things. Thank you, George. We're going to miss you.
Thank you, Colonel. Next up, I'd like to invite someone who has enjoyed a special mentoring relationship with many of us here in this room, including George and me, of course. He served as the Director of Cadet Programs for California Wing Civil Air Patrol when many of us here in this room were cadets. To speak to George's impact within California Wing, I call upon Lieutenant Colonel Kit Ryko.
This looks real easy until you get here. I had the pleasure and the privilege of knowing George for a long time. Our acquaintance, our relationship, our friendship was forged and nurtured through this Civil Air Patrol. As I met George as a bright, inquisitive, thoughtful cadet, I confess I often found him wise beyond his years. I think that being raised in his beloved San Francisco Cadet Squadron 86, it actually says that here, may have had something to do with that. George frequently would add the motto when asked about his home unit, and I believe that mantra accompanied him throughout his CAP career. Our erstwhile relationship allowed me to literally watch George grow through adolescence into the man he became, who we know and love. His Civil Air Patrol career, spanning more than 40 years, saw George lead and contribute at many levels. His squadron, the cadet program in California Wing and for National Headquarters, Pacific Region, and of course, for more than 20 years, George shepherded my beloved Cadet Officer's Basic Course, HOFIL. Everywhere George served in California Wing, he brought his calm, steady, kind, thoughtful leadership. George's style was certainly not brash or flashy. George exemplified humility. His style was to share responsibility, inviting those with whom he served to lead alongside him, to create, to make their individual contributions, to grow a competence of their own. When I spent time with George, and I'm pretty sure this is true for most everybody in this room, his focus was on me. When one was with George, you were always the primary focus of his attention, the most important person to him at the time. Working with George was to have a sense that his goal, his path to success, was to make others feel valued and know that together we could all achieve excellence. Today we celebrate our friend, our colleague, our gentle teammate who skillfully led by bringing out the best in those alongside him. And I believe we're all grateful, better leaders, teammates, and friends for his kind spirit shared with us. And so we'll continue to celebrate your life, sir, with the kindness, the insightful wit, the quiet, gentle competence, and the confidence that you've inspired and instilled. For these, we're grateful. Thank you, George.
Well, as I don't need to tell most of you, George had a distinguished career in CAP, holding positions of great influence throughout the organization, and most recently was serving as the Pacific Region Commander of Civil Air Patrol. I'd like to point out that the flags on the stage represent all the states of the Pacific region, along with the Pacific Region colors. Here to share more about George's contribution to the broader Civil Air Patrol community, many of whom are connected to us by live stream, I invite up Major General Felka, the current CEO and commander of over 61,000 members of the Civil Air Patrol. Pepe?
Hello, my friends. And I say that very purposely because anybody who is a friend of George's is a friend of mine. George had this way about him where he made everybody he talked to feel important. The last time I had a chance to work with George in person was in Atlanta. It was early December, and we had a gathering of Civil Air Patrol's Board of Governors. And as a part of that, we had an event over at the airport where the Board of Governors was looking at some airplanes and some equipment that we had brought in, and it was supported by some local members. Some local members who had nothing to do with the Pacific region of Civil Air Patrol. But George was there in attendance to observe and to learn from the Board of Governors. That's what he did. He learned in every experience. And George took the time to interact with these individual members who were making this event possible. And afterward, they shared with some other CAP leaders, this Colonel Ishikata guy is really great. Oh my gosh, I really enjoyed talking with him. George made that individual cadet feel incredibly important, like they were the most important person in the room, like they were worth listening to, because he felt that that was really true. He learned from everybody that he came in contact with, and that made George a better person, and we are all richer for that. George was humble, and he was unassuming, despite tremendous experience. All of the speakers that came up here before me talked about all these amazing things in George's resume. He had an incredible professional resume, inside and outside of Civil Air Patrol, especially outside. The Army, oh my gosh, all the things that he did in the Army, incredibly impressive. But never did he lead with that. Never did he brag about that. Always he came forward with, what can I learn? How can I help? And I found that to be incredibly impressive. Humble and unassuming, yet fiercely protective of the people that he loved, his cadets his family. George was amazing like that. There was a line you just didn't cross with him. George started in Civil Air Patrol in 1977 as a cadet. The gentleman who was up here, the chaplain who gave the invocation, was a cadet together with George. I even asked our MC, Colonel Lee, if he was a cadet with George. He says, no, I'm an old guy. I was one of George's senior adult leaders when he was a cadet at one of our encampments. But there are a lot of people in this room who knew George as a young person, as a cadet, where he got his start in leadership. And boy, did he flourish in leadership. But you know what? He didn't lead with that either, because he took the time to give back to the program that gave him so much. As we just heard from California Wing Cadet Programs, he turned around and he gave back to not just California Wing, but Region Cadet Leadership School a dozen times over, national headquarters cadet programs. He was basically the interface between the headquarters team and the rest of Civil Air Patrol's cadet programs leaders across the country. And he did that exceptionally well, all the way up to his time as region commander. He continued to do that. We just instituted a new program where cadets get a chance to learn online instead of just studying a textbook. George was an integral part of the rollout of that program we call Cadet Interactive. So every time my son, who's a cadet in our program, looks at Cadet Interactive, I'm going to think of George, because he was a big part of that. We say in Civil Air Patrol that we're volunteers serving America, saving lives and shaping futures. George did exactly that. I know that we could fill this room 100 times over with all of the cadets in ROTC and Civil Air Patrol that George influenced, at least 100 times over. And if those cadets who have since gone on to careers in the military and business and everywhere else in the world over the several decades, if those cadets look back over their shoulder to see George, they'd see that smile right there and him going, because he wanted them to be successful. He poured himself into their success. And I guarantee that those cadets are never going to forget that. George was the commander of our Pacific region, 6 states, including Alaska and Hawaii, which just by virtue of geography and distance presented tremendous challenges. But he became a CAP wartime commander because we're at war with COVID. COVID presents challenges to our resilience like we've never seen before. It's right now ongoing, more than 630 days, the largest mobilization of Civil Air Patrol since World War II. And we needed capable, competent leaders with skills to lead our largest organizations. Pacific region, with these 6 states and more than 7,000 members, was extremely ably and capably led by George Ishikata. He was fantastic at that job. I was actually privileged to be on the panel that interviewed candidates for that job, a rich field of talented CAP officers. And we picked George because the 3 of us on that panel agreed, not only do we want to work with George, we agreed we would work for George. He was that good. He was a tremendous contributor to our senior advisory group, the panel of all region commanders plus the national leadership team. He contributed tremendously. He was hand-selected, actually, to be on a smaller team of volunteers and employees working together on CAP's strategic plan. He was a brilliant thinker. He was a forward thinker, just as you and I were talking about. He was tremendously ahead of his time. He really had a wonderful vision, and we wanted him as part of our team. So he helped us develop our strategic plan that we've just recently implemented, and it's a 5-year strategic plan. So over the next 5 years, every time I sit with the Board of Governors and talk about our strategic plan, George's fingerprints are all over it, and I love that. His impact was significant, but he was only getting started. And I'm sad that he won't get a chance to finish the job that he started in Pacific region. But the job that he started is going to continue to have very positive ripple effects for years to come. George empowered his staff, he trusted his people, and he created and embraced a culture of servant leadership in every aspect of servant leadership. We've heard about it from different speakers today, but it all really speaks to George and his ability to personify servant leadership. We will all miss collaborating with George, strategizing with George, and just being friends with George. I loved being friends with George. He was a self-professed hugger, wasn't he? So do me a favor, honor his memory before you leave here today. Get together with one of your loved ones or somebody that you respect and give them a hug to remember George. When I teach leadership, I talk about challenging the young people in the class to be the leader that you would want to follow. George was the type of leader that I wanted to follow. I'm going to miss working with him. It's my honor to be able to present to Lena the highest award for Civil Air Patrol's service, other than for valor, the Distinguished Service Award. I'll ask Colonel Lee to please read the citation, and I'll make a presentation to Lena of the certificate for the Distinguished Service Award, as well as a plaque for George's time as Region Commander in CAP.
Citation to accompany the Distinguished Service Award to George K. Ishikata. Colonel George K. Ishikata, CAP, distinguished himself through superior performance of his duty as Commander Pacific Region from 16 November 2020 to 30 December 2021. In this critical assignment, the forward-looking leadership and ceaseless pursuit of high standards consistently demonstrated by Colonel Ishikata resulted in significant contributions to the successes of the 7,000 members in 6 wings and some 168 subordinate units under his command. His tenure as Region Commander was during the COVID-19 pandemic when travel and activities were limited. Colonel Ishikata understood the importance of face-to-face meetings and prioritized visiting the wings and connecting with the members, whether in person or virtually. He worked diligently to shift the culture of the Pacific Region Command team, including wing commanders, to one of listening and collaboration with thoughtful, inclusive decision-making. Members of the Pacific Region staff were empowered to run their departments and encouraged to try new initiatives. A staunch supporter of the cadet program, Colonel Ishikata remained an advocate for all cadets and was instrumental in the program's success at all levels. Having served as a member of the cadet program's national staff before taking command, he remained a valued resource at the national level. When the highly innovative Cadet Interactive program was conceived, Colonel Ishikata was instrumental in refining the initial concept and considering policy and process changes required to implement this new program. In the operations area, he brought a fair and balanced process to decisions, harmonizing the needs and desires of the member and customers with the rules and regulations of the corporation. As a CAP Senior Advisory Group member, he quickly contributed to issues facing the corporation on a national level. As the strategic planning process was expanded from a one-year plan to a multi-year plan, Colonel Ishikata was selected to serve with an elite group of CAP leaders to build the strategic action plan. He was also involved in the working group established to expand the strategic implementation plan to align wing and region plans with the overall strategic plan. As the region commander, he set an exemplary high standard for other senior officers to emulate. He focused on servant leadership, prioritizing instilling outstanding customer service throughout the staff, oversaw the region accomplishing over 400 unit and personnel actions, and led efforts to reduce average processing and turnaround time by 40%. The singularly distinctive accomplishments of Colonel Ishikata reflect great credit upon himself, the Pacific Region, and the Civil Air Patrol. Attention to orders. Personnel action number NHQ 5, 18 January 22. The Civil Air Patrol Distinguished Service Award is awarded posthumously to Colonel George K. Ishikata, CAP ID 146262, Pacific Region, for his distinguished performance of duty during the period 16 November 2020 to 30 December 2021, effective January 29, 2022, authority CAPR 39-3. For the National Commander, Susan Parker, Director, Personnel and Member Actions. Program, I invite Command Sergeant Major Aller of the California Youth Programs Directorate to further explain and provide guidance.
Ladies and gentlemen, we're gathered here to render funeral honors to a fallen comrade. Today's honors will consist of the firing of 3 volleys, the playing of taps, and the folding and presentation of the flag. Once the flag is unfolded, I would ask all who are physically able to please stand. Former and current service members, please render a proper hand salute. Upon the conclusion of taps, you may again be seated for the folding and presentation of the flag. Thank you.
What angle do you want? Huh? What angle do you want?
Oh, I'm going to stand.
Okay.
Flag.
Perfect. Are you able to get Tony's camera? Because he's got the flag in his shot.
Ladies and gentlemen, please rise. Please rise. Oh!
Now for a moment of reflection. Thank you for all that shared today. George made everyone feel special. I think that says more about him than any of us, but I hope that just because you didn't come up here to speak, you'll still take a moment throughout this evening to reflect on that specialness and tell someone you talked to after the service how George impacted you and what you've lost in the passing, preferably during that hug period that was suggested earlier. Many of you contributed photos and memories shared with George. We'll take a moment of reflection to reminisce on our good times with our good friend. It is a Buddhist practice to have a moment of meditation. I invite those to feel comfortable to please join in.
Mr. Blue, I told you that I love you, please believe me. Mr. Blue, I have to go now, darling, don't be angry. Know that you're tired, know that you're sore and sick inside for some reason. So I'll leave you with a smile, kiss you on the cheek, and you will call it treason. Mr. Blue, don't hold your head so low that you can't see the sky. Mr. Blue, it ain't so long since you were flying high. Well, that's the way it goes some days. A fever comes at you without a warning. I can see it in your face, you've been waiting to break since you woke up this morning. Mr. Blue, don't hold your head so low you can't see the sky. Mr. Blue, it ain't so long since you were flying high. Mr. Mr. Blue, I told you that I love you, please believe me.
I took my love, took it down, climbed a mountain and I turned around. And I saw my reflection in snow-covered hills till the landslide brought me down. Oh, mirror in the sky, what is love? Can the child within my heart rise above? Can I sail through the changing ocean tides? Can I handle the seasons of my life? Well, I've been afraid of changing build my life around you. But time makes you bolder, even children get older, and I'm getting older too. Well, I've been afraid of changing, 'cause I've built my life around you. But time makes you bolder, when children get older, and I'm getting older too. Oh, I'm getting older too. Oh, take my love, take it down. Oh, climb a mountain and turn around. And if you see my reflection in the snow-covered hills, where the landslide brings you down. And if you see my reflection in the snow-covered hills, where the landslide brings you down. Oh, the landslide brings you down.
I was doing okay right up to some of those pictures. George read the book, The Giving Tree, to many of us, and in his passing, it takes on a whole new meaning. He truly lived his life giving all of himself to those he loved, which was all of us, and more. The book doesn't show us how to say goodbye to someone who gave us so much. Sometimes all we can do is miss him. I direct your attention to the altar and to the chair where George would sit and read The Giving Tree. Grace, where are you? I invite George's lifelong friend Grace to the stage to lead us in a group song, a sort of formal farewell.
Love to get the mask off, even if I have to talk. George and I became friends in high school, and especially in CAP during our high school and college years. We enjoyed making memories, and ever since then, we've really enjoyed sharing those memories with each other. And one of the ways, and now that I've been to 2 memorial services about George, I'm starting to think that maybe this was my passion, and he just supported me. But it seemed at the time like we really loved getting together and singing the old songs. Back when we were cadets, CAP, at least here in California Wing, sang a lot more. You know, there were the old military songs that somebody had converted into CAP songs, and we don't do that much anymore, but we did it back then. And in the intervening years, we really enjoyed looking back, sharing those memories through those songs. At the end of our annual encampment every year, back in the day, a tradition that died out long ago had the female cadets singing a special song at the end of the encampment party. It was a Girl Scout song, I didn't know that at the time, but that was sung at the end of camp. And it worked equally well at the end of encampment. It's especially poignant today, and George would appreciate that. If you remember the song, and I know there are those out here that do. I really appreciate if you sing. They're going to have the words on the screen, and it's an easy one to learn, so I ask that anyone, if you can, sing along or hum along or just appreciate the message. Are you ready? Let's do it. I've got to see what's on the screen.
Easy to learn.
Ooh, I want to linger such a perfect night. Ooh, it doesn't seem quite right. Ooh, that this should be my last with you. Ooh, and come September, ooh, I will remember, ooh, the time that I spent here with you. Ooh, and as the years go by, ooh, I think of you and sigh. Ooh, this is good night, but not goodbye.
If you have any questions, please let me know. I hope to see you guys soon. Take care.
Good night, George.
Okay, the pictures weren't the hardest part. Thank you for joining us today. Please remain and enjoy a nice reception in George's honor. Our meal will be served immediately following this ceremony, which I guess is right now. Thank you so much. Be safe.
One last, is it on? Oh, no. Turn it on. One last announcement. If you are or have ever been a member of San Francisco Cadet Squadron 86.
Excellent connection.
I'd ask that you gather to the right of the screen for a photo, and I'd also like to invite our group commander, wing commander, region commander, and national commander to do us the honor of joining us in that photo. I would really appreciate it. Oh, why not? I didn't think I'd be able to sit.
Bend my legs again.
Ned, present to the great cadets.
Made it. I demoted your speech.
I left my speech, my mask. I abandoned ship up here. There it is.
Ladies and gentlemen, you'll find that to the right of the building, we have beverages available, and then food will be available to your left. Okay, so if you're facing the stage, to your right is all beverages, and to your left will be the food, down in the back classroom.